Hola a todos, mi nombre es Suna y tengo un canal de YouTube en el que hablo sobre libros y promuevo la lectura. El día de hoy estamos aquí para conversar con la autora Niven y quiero mandarles saludos a todos los lectores de Costa Rica y El Salvador quienes nos están viendo ahorita y recordarles que pueden encontrar sus libros Violet y Finch, Aquí empieza todo, en inglés y español, al igual que su libro más reciente Breathless en la librería internacional de Costa Rica y en la internacional de El Salvador. Ella es la autora de Violet y Finch, Aquí empieza todo, al igual que la serie popular de Velvet Jeans. Ella también ha escrito varios libros de no ficción, incluyendo Ada Blackjack y The Ice Master. Violet y Finch fue adoptado a la pantalla grande este año por Netflix y ahora le voy a dar la palabra a la autora. Hi Jennifer, would you like to greet your readers?
I would love to. Hola, Costa Rica y El Salvador. Gracias por leyendo mis libros. Te amo.
Oh, that was great Spanish.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure to be here, and I am really grateful for the time you've given us today. So let's start talking about your newest release, Breathless, which I personally really enjoyed. So maybe could you start telling us what is it about in your own words?
Absolutely. And first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. This is an honor. Breathless is about a girl named Claude Henry who just a week before high school graduation learns that her parents are getting separated. And this kind of turns her whole world upside down, makes her whole world change in an instant. She feels like the floor has been pulled out from underneath her feet. And just days after graduation, she and her mother moved to a remote Georgia island where they don't have much cell service or Wi-Fi. She's cut off from everyone, her best friend, the boy she likes, her father, her dog, her home, everything she's always known. And it's really about beginning again, like not just beginning again, but it's the summer she really begins. And she meets a boy named Jeremiah Crew, who is mysterious and romantic, and they have all of these adventures on the island. And it's a romance and a love story, but I think even more than that, it's a story about finding yourself and learning to build a new floor underneath your feet when your world has changed.
Oh, I love the description you gave us about the book. I went into it without knowing too much, and I would have totally picked it up with what you just said. So could you tell us a little bit about the inspiration, maybe like the original idea behind the book?
Absolutely. It's actually a very personal story. All the Bright Places was like kind of the first really personal story I wrote for young adults. Mm-hmm. And that was inspired by a boy I loved and lost to suicide. And that showed me that I could really write a personal story and dig deep enough to kind of go back into my past and my heart and my soul. And that's what I did with Breathless. I wrote about a summer that was really difficult for me, actually. I'm an only child, and it was the summer that my parents separated, and I felt like everything I'd ever known was gone, and I had to start over and really figure out who I was and where I belonged in the world. And so that's where it came from. And I wasn't sure exactly who this boy was that she met, but it's interesting because while I was writing the story, I met the man who's now my husband. And we had so many adventures on the island that is the setting for the book. And that really informed not only Jeremiah Crew, but it informed all the adventures that Claude and Maya have on this island. So a lot of those adventures were ones that we had. So it was personal in that way too.
Oh, that sounds very romantic and cute. And I absolutely enjoyed reading about Maya and Claude's stories. So I can only imagine what you kind of lived in the island too. That sounds really, really nice.
It was amazing. I was there for a couple of weeks and it was just lovely.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So are there any funny things that happened while you were writing this book?
Hmm. Well, definitely the most amazing thing that happened was I met my husband. But there were a lot of
Yeah.
funny things that happened. It was, I think some of the adventures were like there's an adventure in where Claude and Maya get trapped in the basement of this place on the island, and
Yeah.
he's telling her a ghost story, and it kind of happens at that time, and they get locked in, which is really, it was weird how it happened, and it felt like maybe the ghost was locking them in.
Yeah.
And that happened to us, and that was the first day we met, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was interesting. And I think it's not funny, but the most magical moment for me was we were driving on the island, and there are no roads on this island. The only roads are like, dirt paths, and no cars are allowed unless it's Park Service vehicles or the 11 people who live there. So he was living there at the time, and he had a truck, and we were driving in the truck, and it's just, there's no noise or light pollution at all. So that it was dark, dark, dark. And we we're driving through the night, and he turned the lights off, the headlights off. And I was at first like, we're going to crash into something. But he said, someone told me once that you can see in the dark if you just trust yourself. You just have to adapt and let your eyes get used to it. And so the whole way that we rode through the dark, but it was lit up by fireflies, like lightning bugs. And that was magical for me. And that was like something I thought, I'll never forget this, even if I never see him again. And I put that in the book. So that's not the funniest one, very magical one.
Oh, so I feel like it will actually live on through the book as well and your readers. And that's such a nice thing. Yeah. I thought that was like fiction, but hearing that it's actual, like real life thing, that's really, really nice. Yeah.
Thank you.
So how did you choose the character names? Because Claude and even Maya, I feel like they have these special names. Like, where did they come up from?
It's interesting always with characters, because sometimes characters just kind of name themselves and they arrive already named. You don't know where it comes from. But with Claude and Maya, I knew with Claude, I wanted her to have, a pretty kind of classic name, but I wanted to shorten it with a kind of, very like strong sounding nickname. And so I was just playing with a lot of different names, and I think I landed on Claude because I was looking for music to listen to, and there was a French, and Claude listens to a lot of French music, and there was a singer named Claudine, and I can't remember her last name, but I was like, Claudine, oh, Claude, and I thought, oh, that's her. And suddenly, you get a character name right when you hear the name or you see the name, and you immediately think of all these things you want to write about that character. It's as if the name can bring the character to life. And with Maya, I always like the name Jeremiah, and the last name Crew kind of popped into my mind. So he was easier. Like, he just kind of came out of nowhere, and it was like, oh, Jeremiah Crew. And it's funny because his initials, JC, are my husband's initials. So there's some, kind of cool stuff in there too.
Oh, I love how personal the book actually is for you.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. And I thought it was funny how the first time Claude hears Jeremiah's nickname, Maya, she says, oh, Maya, like a girl's name. Okay. And then he's there like, oh, no, it's just Maya. And I was like, oh, that's a funny little detail. Yeah. And when you were writing the book, was Breathless already the title, or did you have a different title in mind?
I went through a couple of different titles, or at least searching for titles. And I felt like, my initial thought was to do something that had maybe 4 words, like all the bright places, holding up the universe, so that it would, right, that it would go with that. But I don't know, for some reason I kept thinking it needed to just have 1 word. And we originally, actually, I was calling it Virginity, because it was a lot more about Claude losing her virginity that summer. And so I was just calling it Virginity as kind of just like, as I was working on it, I was saving it under that file name. But I wanted a different title for it. And so I had actually seen the movie that Claude watches in the book. I don't name the movie, but there's a French film called Breathless. And this
Oh, okay.
inspires Claude to cut her hair off completely when she gets to the island.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, Breathless. I like that because she's breathless with love and sex and romance, but at the same time, she's also breathless because her world has changed and she feels like she can't catch her breath with everything that's happening to her.
Yeah. Oh, no, I really like the title. I think it was eye-catching. And well, talking about the title, we have to talk about the book cover. So did you have any say in designing it, or it was like editorial part, they just said, this is gonna be the cover?
It's, I'm very fortunate in that I get to weigh in on the book cover. I certainly don't design the book cover. I get asked a lot, if I designed it, and I absolutely did not. They're wonderful, amazing artists at Random House. The art department is incredible. And also there's this wonderful artist named Tito Morello who lives in France, and he's the one who painted. It's an actual painting that's on the cover.
Oh, okay.
And it was so beautiful. And it just, when I saw it, I was like, yes, it's beautiful. Like the colors were vivid, just everything about it was stunning.
And it reminds me of the scene from the book where they go swimming for the first time and she's like hesitant. Should I go in? Should I not? And it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like a common feeling your characters go through in your other books as well is this feeling of abandonment. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I definitely think that's true. And I think, abandonment, and then also not really feeling like an insider, like not really feeling like they belong wherever they are. And I think that comes from a couple of places in me. I mean, it's definitely all personal. When I was in fourth grade, we moved from Maryland to Indiana, and I just hated it. And in fact, I wrote one of my first books called My Life in Indiana, or I Will Never Be Happy Again. Very dramatic. Gave it to my parents to read because I wanted to make sure they understood how miserable I was. But I think, I was happy again, but I didn't ever really feel at home there. I didn't ever really feel like I fit in. So I think that comes from that. And then I think the abandonment, I think, the summer that my parents split up, I felt like, even though he didn't, I felt like my dad kind of abandoned us, and I felt abandoned because of the dissolution of their marriage and the fact that my mom and I left and like went to this remote place. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And I know that so many people, I know that's such a universal feeling. Not exactly feeling like you fit in, and also feeling like you're alone or you're abandoned or you've been left behind by something or someone. So I think that, it definitely is something that I can write about personally, but it's also universal too.
Yeah. I really like how, since you talk from personal experiences, I feel like the books become more real because of that. So if there is one thing you would like your readers to take from your books, what would it be?
I want them to know that they are not alone and that there are bright places, even in dark times, that they're a bright place. I've heard a lot of feedback, especially from All the Bright Places, but from all my books, just readers saying, thank you so much for letting me know I matter and that I'm seen and that I'm not alone. And so that's the thing I always try to reinforce with them, just that they're lovely. They are at all the colors I want at full brightness. I sincerely, sincerely mean that. And they are not alone, because there's so many of us who feel all the feelings that we have and feel, and there's a lot of commonality in that.
Yeah, I think that's something I really respect about you, because I feel like not a lot of people talk so openly about these kind of experiences. And I really find it important to do it, like to speak up. And yeah, I really, really, really enjoy your book because of that.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome. So maybe moving on to broader topics. I heard that you were really involved in the making of the movie adaptation of All the Bright Places. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, I was really lucky because a lot of writers who are fortunate enough to get their books optioned aren't always included in the process. And I was included on a lot of decisions before we ever, went to film, and, including casting, which was so great to be involved in that. And then also I got to write the screenplay. And that was really an amazing experience because it's such a collaboration. And I collaborated with a wonderful writer named Liz Hanna on the script. But I had gone to film school years ago and got my master's in screenwriting, but it had been a while and I'd forgotten how much I love that collaboration process. Like the director and the producers and the actors, like everyone is involved in the script. So it's not just you. And it's very different from writing a book in that way. But it was really special. It was very special to work on it and to know how invested everyone was in the book becoming a movie.
Oh, that's so cool that you actually got to write the screenplay for the movie. And okay, so you've made thousands of people cry with your books, the movie, including me. So I talk from personal experience. So have you ever cried writing your own books?
Absolutely. I mean, I had a young writer ask me once, how do you write personal stories without crying? And I said, I can't personally, because if I want my readers to feel how I want them to feel, I need to feel that when I'm writing it. So I shed a lot of tears during all my books, especially All the Bright Places, but I cried a lot. And I also laughed, and it's a very it's a very emotional experience writing a book, especially if it has personal elements to it, because you do need to feel all those feelings.
Yeah. Oh, so are there any other books by other authors that have made you cry?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love The Sky is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson. I read it after my mom died, and it was, just it's such a beautiful book about loss. And that one really spoke to me and I cried. And oh my goodness, when else did I cry? I cried. My best friend Angelo Sermales has a book, wonderful YA novel called The Dangerous Art of Blending In. And that made me cry, especially because I know that it's a very personal story for him. And Carrie Clutter's The First Time She Drowned, and Ava DeLara's, any of her books, any of them. And
yes, I agree.
Yes, there's so many wonderful YA novels and stories. And I'm not a big crier during, like, when I read books, but there are definitely some, like I think the most recent one was The Brave by James Bird, and I cried, and it was a good cry though.
Yeah, it's always good to cry sometimes.
It is.
So I feel like most of your books are contemporary, right? I know you have a few nonfiction books as well.
Yes.
So do you usually just read contemporary books, or are there other genres you enjoy reading?
It's interesting. I am a reader, a huge reader, and I read kind of everything. I tend to get on tangents where I'm like, oh my gosh, like Daniel Page's The Ravens just came out with Cass Morgan, and it's so good. And then I'm like, witches, and I'm like Adriana Mather, like all of her wonderful books about, that have anything kind of supernatural or witchy. And so I get on these kind of kicks, but at the same time, when I am writing a book, and lately I've been writing young adult, I try not to read the same genre that I'm writing, because I don't want to accidentally mimic anyone's voice, or I need a kind of break from the genre just because I've been working all day on something. So then I tend to pick up like adult novels. Lately, during this pandemic, I've been listening to audiobooks of like mystery novels like Lisa Jewell or Ruth Ware or Lucy Foley, just like devouring those for some reason. So it's been interesting. I never know what I'm going to read.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, do you have any unpublished novels or unfinished novels that are these kind of genres, like mystery, fantasy?
I have one. That's kind of supernatural, not quite fantasy, but almost. And it's not, I've only written a few chapters of it and I have a long outline of it. And it's something I've thought about, but I've only shown one or two people. Like I haven't like really shared it yet, but I'm thinking somewhere down the line, I need to bring it out because I really love writing it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really interested in reading a non-contemporary book by you. I think that would be really interesting.
I would love to write one.
So what would you say is the biggest difference between writing a nonfiction and a fiction? And how does the research process differ from each other for you?
I think that's a great question. I started my career in nonfiction, and one of the things that I learned was I love researching. So I did a lot of research for this first book. And I also did so much outlining because I was dealing with a lot of firsthand journals of men who had been on an expedition. And I wanted to like write down what happened on every single day of the expedition according to each man. So I had like charts and graphs and all these notes and so many things and a complete outline of the book. And then when I wrote my first novel, 2 books later, I was like talking to my mother, and she was also an author. And I was telling her, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing because I started in nonfiction. So now I know exactly how to write a book. So I'm just going to outline everything. I've outlined it. I've got like a 60-page outline. I've done all of this for the novel and everything. And she was like, and then about a week later, we were talking and she asked about the book again. And I was like, it's terrible. Like the characters have gone off in different directions and I don't know what's happening with the plot. I had to throw the outline away. And she was like, welcome to fiction. And it is so different. I think I've learned to be more a pantser, which is, they generally are asked in YA, are you a pantser or a plotter? And I'm a bit of both.
Yeah.
So I've learned to be more of a pantser than I used to be because there's so much in fiction. You don't know what's going to happen and you kind of have to follow the story and the characters and they lead you on these wonderful detours. So I try to have a general roadmap of where I'm going, but then allow myself to, see what the detours are and explore those too.
So would you say that you have the character before the actual plot or a little bit of both and then you build around them?
A little bit of both. I tend to know what the general story is in terms of I know the premise for the story, and then the characters kind of come along with that. And then I do a lot of work before I ever start, putting words on paper. I do a lot of work beforehand on characters to try to really get to know the characters as much as I can and the place, and then really hammer out at least the main beats of the story so that I know what those are before I start actually like writing. So I would say it's definitely a little of both. The characters arrive with a premise and then I have to get to know them better and get to know the story better.
So have you ever had to rewrite an entire manuscript? Because I've heard some authors like write something and then they're like, no, like this is not working for me, and just like rewrite the whole thing.
I have had to do that. it was interesting. I did a series of adult novels that are historical fiction. And the last one in the series, I kind of knew instinctively what I wanted it to be, but I, for some reason, went down another path. And I remember handing it in to my editor, and she had a lot of notes. And she never said, rewrite this completely, but I just sat with it for a little bit. And thought, I won't be able to stand it if I don't write the book that I initially had wanted to write. So I went back to the drawing board and just started over. And it was, oh my gosh. And I was on deadline too. So I had to do it pretty quickly, but I was very happy that I did it in the long run.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear. So what we've talked right now, I feel like most of your characters have a little bit of you, like since you talk about personal experiences, but which of your characters do you relate to the most?
I think, oh my gosh, I think I probably relate most to Violet and Libby, kind of a combination of the two. I mean, I relate a lot to Claude, but she's a much more kind of self-realized person than I was that summer when I was going through the things she was going through. And I think with Violet, you know, one of the things that I've learned in life is that you have to be able to let the people closest to you in and let them know what you're going through and talk to, you know, them about it. And that's something that Violet, you know, she tends to like smile and like keep all of that tucked away. And so I think there are a lot of ways in which I'm like her. And then I think a lot of ways in which I'm like Libby, although Libby's far braver than I am.
But maybe those characters are braver or more self-together because you already went through it and you know now that it's going to be okay.
Yes.
Maybe.
I think so. That's a lovely way to put it. I think that so many of us, like as authors for young adults, we write the version of ourselves or the book that we wish we had had then when we were going through these things, and the version of ourselves we wish we could have turned into or been. So I think that's, you know, that's kind of a wonderful experience to get to do it over again in that way.
What would you say is hardest part of writing from the point of view of a teenager?
I think, you know, you want to make sure that everything sounds authentic and real. To me, it's really important that you write honestly, especially if you're writing about topics that are sensitive, like mental health, suicide, sex, bullying, any of those things. And I think that you need to write responsibly, honestly, and remember that your audience is really smart. I think the young adult audience is the smartest reading audience there is. They are so discerning. They can tell if something is not real, if it rings untrue. And that's something I always keep in mind. I mean, I write a lot from my heart, but I also make sure that I share my manuscript with actual teenagers, because even though I am a teenager inside in a lot of ways, and I can tap into that voice, I want to make sure that it sounds as current as possible in our world today. So I will share it with it out into the world.
Yeah. Okay. So who's your first reader? Like once you write something, who's that one person you say, I need you to read this right now?
It used to be my mom. She died before All the Bright Places came out, but that was the last book of mine that she read. And she was always my first reader. And it was so heartbreaking when she died for so many reasons. And that was one of them, is that I didn't have that first reader anymore. But my husband is now my first reader. And it's wonderful because he kind of goes about it the same way my mom did, with great humor and sensitivity and honesty and love. And I just trust him implicitly in the things that, you know, in his the way that he talks about it and giving it to him, because that's very scary to give it to a reader after you've been alone with it for all that time is so frightening. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't do it. So you have to be able to give it to someone you trust and love and who loves you, so that, you know, and I want to hear everything that they have to say, because it's all for the work and the betterment of the work. But you do, like, it feels very scary at first.
Yeah, I can only imagine that it does. So what does a typical writing day for you look like? Do you have a schedule? How many hours a day do you write?
It's, you know, ideally I would have like endless hours each day to do creative work, but that doesn't always happen, especially when I'm working on multiple projects, which I always am.
Yeah.
So I try to start the day with a workout if I can, because that helps me kind of get into the mindset and I can think about it while I'm working out. And then come into my day probably around 10 o'clock and then do all the kind of housekeeping things I have to do, like answering emails and responding to calls and other things like that, doing that kind of the business of writing, which takes up a lot of time and is very necessary. And then I try to make sure I have writing time carved out, like creative time. And sometimes it's just like going over something that you're editing and then you have to flip back to someone, or sometimes it's, you know, brainstorming and thinking of the first draft and working on that. And but I always try to make sure there's at least some creative time, even if it's like 30 minutes per day. And the best days are when it's like the whole day is just, I get to brainstorm or write. It's just amazing.
Oh, so if you weren't an author, what do you think you would be?
I think I would be a dancer, or
wow.
Love to dance. And I always thought, oh, it'd be so wonderful, like dance on Broadway or something like that. Just, I still want to do that, you know, someday. And I also thought, and being an archaeologist would be absolutely fascinating, or like some sort of forensic anthropologist. Those are the things I would do.
Wow.
Or maybe all of them somehow, like together.
Why not?
Why not? Exactly.
Wow. So did you used to dance from a young age then?
I did. I took lessons since I was little and just loved it, like, so much. And you know, but I never really thought about it seriously. I think because as much as I love to dance, I always love to write even more. And from a young age, writing was always what I most wanted to do and most enjoyed.
Oh, that's so nice that you actually got to keep doing it. And and you have actual readers now and fans.
Yes.
Okay, so since you told me you're a reader, if you could have dinner with 3 fictional characters, who would they be and why?
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Wow. I think Alice from Wonderland, because she's my favorite fictional character. Maybe Alice, maybe Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. And I think for the other one, oh my goodness, there's so many. I'm just trying to think through all of them that I love. Oh, that's such a hard question, but it's such a great question too. And I'm sure afterward I'll be like, oh, I didn't have to say this person. Could I choose Finch? Because I'd really love Finch to be there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so nice. I didn't actually think about Alice, but now that you mention it, but like, how did I not think about that? Alice will be wonderful. Yeah.
That would be a fun dinner party.
So, yeah, totally. And your cat.
Yes.
Oh, so Claude has a cat. Was the cat inspired in any of yours?
Definitely. Like, so Claude has a cat named Dandelion, and actually, Libby has a cat in Holy Empty Universe named George. And George is exactly like I had a cat named George who was very much like the one in Libby's in Holy Empty Universe. So George was inspired by George. And Dandelion he's kind of inspired by my cat Linus, who is very crazy and very funny and very much a presence in this house.
They like to be heard and seen.
Absolutely.
So which are your 3 go-to book recommendations for any reader?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. Again, it's so hard. There's so many wonderful ones. I love We Were Liars by E. Lockhart.
I love that one too.
So good. I think the writing is amazing.
The plot twist.
It's so good. It's so good. It's like, I admire it so much. So I would recommend that. I would recommend Speak by Lori Hall Sanderson. I love that book. I think it's so wonderful and powerful. And maybe Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. There's so many though.
Okay. So
I'll give you those.
You guys watching have okay. So you guys watching have 3 recommendations. You guys can go read after this video. Which are your 3 go-to authors?
My favorite author is one who lived a long time ago. Her name is Shirley Jackson, and she wrote the book The Haunting of Hill House, which now is a Netflix series.
Oh yeah.
She's amazing. Like, she's my favorite. Actually, I have her books like stacked up right here. She's a really wonderful writer, and she's my favorite. And so she's definitely one of them. And my mother, Penelope Niven, is definitely one of my go-to authors. Fortunately, she wrote a lot of books. Unfortunately, she's not here to write any others, but I pick up her books from time to time and reread them. And one of my others is Nick Hornby, who wrote like About a Boy and Juliet Naked, and he's amazing. He just had a new one that came out, and I was like, yay.
Yeah. So I feel like I only know Shirley Jackson because of The Haunting of Hill House. So do you enjoy horror, like usually?
I like that kind of gothic horror that, not necessarily like horror, but I love the kind of gothic supernatural horror. And there's, Supernatural, the TV show, is like my favorite television show. I'm so sad that it's ended, but I do love that kind of thing, like that. It like flirts with horror, I guess. It's like, supernatural. There are some supernatural elements, but the world itself looks like our world. Oh, Neil Gaiman is another author who's a very go-to author for me. I love his work.
Of course.
And he's kind of a great example of that. So many of like the worlds that he creates look like the world we live in, but there's all this other stuff in this other world that kind of goes on like parallel to it.
So do you have any author friends and like someone who helps you become a better writer?
Yes, absolutely. My mom, first and foremost, was like my best friend, and also she shaped me the most, I think, not only as a person, but as a writer. But I have really close author friends, and I'm so grateful for them. It's funny that you're saying that, because I'm on this group chat right now with like Adriana Mather and Jeff Setner and Angelo Sermales and Carrie Clutter and Brittany Caviaro and Emily Henry. And we're like, that's our crew. And so we've been texting like all day today. So anyway, it's really lovely to have that. And Adriana's husband, James Bird, I mentioned the Brave, like he's like very close. And Cami Garcia and Danielle Page and David Levithan and just my friend Ronnie Davis, like all of these people are just so dear to me. And it's wonderful because like the YA community is very close. So you feel like even if you don't see them a lot or talk to them all the time or only see them at events, you feel like you have these wonderful author friends because everyone's very supportive of everyone else. And so I feel very grateful for that community.
Oh, that sounds really nice.
It is. And they're
so
also they can edit your work too, or look at your work, or you can talk to them about creativity, which is great too.
So since you are a screenwriter as well, if you could adapt any book into a movie or series, what would it be?
It's a great question. These questions are amazing. Oh my gosh. I think, what would I like to adapt? Oh, there's so many. There's this book by Ruth Ware called The Turn of the Key, and it just gutted me. It was so amazing. I think I would want to adapt that one if I could. It was really, really, like, I would love to write that one. Yeah.
Would it be a movie or a series?
Probably a series. I've written for both movies and TV. And while I'm grateful to do the movies, I feel like I like television better. Like I feel like that's less daunting to me, and my sensibility is more suited to it. So probably a series. Yeah, like a limited series.
I feel like so your most recent YA novels, they're all standalones. Have you ever thought about writing a sequel to any of them?
I have, now and then I'll think about, especially All the Bright Places, because I get a lot of questions about that. Would I ever write a prequel, or would I ever write Violet's story? And I think about it, but I think that I like it as a standalone too. And I feel like it is a standalone. And I feel like also, I know as a reader, like I love to imagine what might happen, and my version might look very different from, if I wrote a sequel to All the Right Places, it might look very different from how readers have like already built the story in their heads of what happens after.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to disturb that. But I never say never either. So, and right now it's great because I'm working on the Wholly Empty Universe screenplay, and that is giving me like the whole,
really? Oh,
and so it's really been fun because the people I'm working with are just fantastic, and I am getting this like whole new chance at the story. I mean, the story is there, but I'm getting to like many things have to change when you put it on screen because there isn't enough room to put the entire book on the screen. So it's just really fun to play with it again and add some new things to it, because so in a way it's like I'm kind of getting to do that with Wholly Empty Universe. And that's really fun to go back into those characters.
Oh, so my next question was if you were working on any other books, but I guess you're working on this screenplay right now. And when can we expect a new book?
Let's see. Okay, so I'm working on the script, but I'm starting to work on the next young adult novel. I also just finished a collaboration with another young adult author, and I can't quite say who, but it will most likely come out next year. So soon we'll get to talk about it, and I'm really excited. And we just went through edits with our editor, and it's like getting close to like, we'll have a cover and we'll get to announce it, and they'll have a pub date. So that'll be kind of the next thing coming for me.
Oh, that is very exciting. I'll be stalking your Instagram
Good.
to
Okay.
see when we'll get the cover.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe to start wrapping it up, the last question I have is, if you have an advice for your younger self, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, I love that. I would tell her to make sure to open up to people and share how she's feeling, to not always hide behind a smile, but to let other people in. Because it's important. It's so important to talk to other people about what you're going through and not to go through it alone. And I think that's something that a lot of my readers are struggling with and have struggled with, is feeling so isolated, especially right now. I think we're all feeling that to some degree because of the world. But just letting other people in and realizing, I think, by doing that, that you're not alone, which is super important.
Well, thank you so much for this lovely interview. And since you said hi in Spanish, maybe would you like to say goodbye as well?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. I'm so, so honored for this. This has been amazing. And the questions were fantastic. So thank you.
The honor was mine.
And adios.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a Jennifer por estar aquí y también a la Librería Internacional, a la Internacional, a Penguin Random House por habernos prestado este espacio el día de hoy. Y también muchas gracias a todos ustedes, los lectores, por estar aquí y acompañarnos el día de hoy. Y pues sí, sin más que decir, nos vamos a despedir y nos veremos muy pronto en el canal. Y sí, hasta luego. Chao.
Bye. Te amo.